Obi-Wan's distress call is only a few seconds long, yet within those few lines, he manages to close the door on a fallen Jedi Order, preserve what little hope remains in the galaxy, and quietly signal the birth of a future that hasn't even begun. And when you break down the message line by line, you discover that it isn't just a warning, it's a final reflection on everything the Jedi became, everything they lost, and what Obi-Wan believed had to change in order for a new hope to rise again. Before we jump in, which part of Obi-Wan's message has always stayed with you the most? The moment behind the message. To understand the meaning of Obi-Wan's message, we first need to understand the emotional reality of the moment he records it. This isn't Obi-Wan the negotiator, or Obi-Wan the general, or even Obi-Wan the Jedi Master. This is a man who has just watched his entire order fall in real time. The temple, the only home he's ever known, is filled with smoke. The people he trained beside, laughed with, meditated with, are gone, and the boy he raised like a brother has become the hand that carried out its destruction. The tone of the message makes far more sense when you remember who he is speaking to. Not the council, not the public, but any lost Jedi wandering the galaxy, desperate for clarity in a moment where nothing makes sense. Obi-Wan's voice is steady, not because he is calm, but because the galaxy has reached a point where emotion itself could shatter what little remains of him, and in that restraint lies the weight of everything he's seen. What Obi-Wan was really saying. Let's walk through the message piece by piece, because every sentence carries a meaning deeper than what we hear on the surface. This is Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. He opens by identifying himself in the role he held before everything collapsed. Not General Kenobi, which he was throughout the Clone Wars. He speaks as a Jedi Master for the last time. I regret to report that both our Jedi Order and Republic have fallen. This line is devastating precisely because it places the Jedi and Republic side by side. It acknowledges the truth the prequels spent years building toward. Their fates had become intertwined. The fall of the Republic wasn't separate from the fall of the Jedi. It was a collapse born from decades of political entanglement, blindness, and manipulation. A dark shadow of the Empire is rising to take their place. Obi-Wan's wording is deliberate. He doesn't say the Empire has risen, but that it is rising. That small difference acknowledges the transitional moment they're in. The Senate hasn't yet dissolved. Imperial rule hasn't fully crystallized. And the galaxy hasn't collectively realized what it's becoming. Obi-Wan is signaling that although the darkness has taken hold, its power isn't yet absolute. There is still time for resistance, even if that resistance begins with nothing more than survival. This message is a warning and a reminder for any surviving Jedi. These two ideas, warning and reminder, show the double purpose of the transmission. The warning is practical. Returning to the temple is suicide. The reminder is philosophical. Even without the temple, the Jedi are still Jedi. This is the closest Obi-Wan comes to acknowledging that the Order's identity can survive without its institutions. A concept the prequel-era Jedi rarely embraced. Trust in the Force. This may seem like a simple encouragement, but in this context, it's a complete recentering of Jedi philosophy. The Republic is gone. The Council is gone. Their traditions and structures are gone. The only thing that remains untouched is the Force itself. Obi-Wan is pointing the survivors back toward the one principle the Jedi should never have drifted from. Faith not in governments or doctrines, but in the living Force. Do not return to the temple. That time has passed. This is the line that cuts the deepest. The Jedi Temple has stood for thousands of years, long before the Republic, long before most galactic institutions. It is not just a headquarters, it is a symbol of stability, knowledge and community, and yet Obi-Wan is telling them, with absolute finality, that this symbol no longer belongs to them. This is him accepting that the reality the entire Order failed to see. They cannot go back to what they were. That era is over. Avoid Coruscant. Avoid detection. Be secret, but be strong. This line is both tactical and moral. Coruscant is the heart of what failed. To draw survivors back to it is to invite annihilation. The last fragment, but be strong, is critical. Secrecy is not an excuse for passivity. Obedience to the Force and survival must be active. Be hidden, but do not let fear hollow you out. We will each be challenged. Our trust, our fate, our friendships. This moment stands out because it's one of the only times a Jedi openly acknowledges emotional bonds as something meaningful rather than something to suppress. Obi-Wan knows that survivors will face not only external dangers, but internal ones. Grief, anger, guilt, and the trauma of betrayal. He includes friendships in that list because his own heart is breaking. The message is universal, but the pain behind it is personal. But we must persevere. This line is Obi-Wan's pivot from grief to purpose. He's grounding the surviving Jedi in the reality that endurance, not victory, is their first task. Before they can rebuild anything, they must live long enough to see what comes next. This is where the idea of scattered Jedi, Cal Kestis, Kanan Jarrus, Ahsoka Tano, even begins to take shape. And in time, I believe a new hope will emerge. This is where the message shifts from mourning to prophecy. Obi-Wan may be speaking in broad terms, but we know he is thinking about Luke. This is the seed of the original trilogy, the bridge between eras. Out of universe, this line functions as a thematic handoff to Episode 4. In universe, it anchors Obi-Wan to the single purpose that will define the rest of his life. May the Force be with you, always. The ending is simple, but not generic. It feels like a farewell delivered from the ruins of an age. A final blessing from a master who knows he will never stand before a council again. For the survivors, it is a reminder that no matter how far the galaxy falls, the Force endures. For Obi-Wan, it is his final act as a representative of the Jedi of old. But why was the message phrased so broadly and delivered with such restraint? And why does it appear consistently in every era of Star Wars storytelling? If you enjoy deep lore breakdowns like this, then make sure you subscribe. We're building a community who love diving deeper than surface level explanations. Why this message had to be written this way. This transmission wasn't just created as a scene for Revenge of the Sith. It had to serve multiple functions across the franchise. First, it needed to be timeless. Filoni and Lucas knew that holo recording would appear in stories set years later, in Rebels, Fallen Order, Survivor, and future novels. That meant the language had to avoid specifics that future writers might contradict. No dates, no references to individual Jedi, nothing that could be invalidated by later canon. It also needed to resonate culturally. Lucas has always woven real-world history into Star Wars, and Obi-Wan's message mirrors last transmissions from governments on the brink of collapse, and resistance broadcasts meant to preserve hope when all structure has fallen away. It feels familiar because it's modelled on real messages people heard during some of the darkest moments of human history. Finally, it needed to mark a character transition. This is the last moment Obi-Wan speaks as a Jedi Master before transforming into Ben Kenobi, the quiet guardian who hides on Tatooine for nearly 20 years. The tone reflects someone who is mourning, exhausted, yet unwilling to surrender to despair because he knows one last responsibility remains. But who actually heard the message? And did it truly change the trajectory of the remaining Jedi? Who heard the message and how it shaped survivors? Canon shows that several Jedi, and even non-Jedi, encountered this transmission in the years following Order 66. Cal Kestis hears it from Seer Junda's holocron, and the message becomes the philosophical axis of his journey, reinforcing that the Jedi path can continue even without the temple. Kanan Jarrus survives Order 66 before the message reaches the wider galaxy, but later references it as a confirmation of what he lived through. He also had the holocron that Ezra unlocked to hear the message. Other survivors, like Ferren Barr in the Vader comics, adopt the message as a guiding principle in their resistance. The transmission's real influence, however, is not on the galaxy. It is on the identity of the Jedi themselves. The war forced them into soldiers. The fall destroyed their structure. Obi-Wan's message serves as a quiet reset button. The Jedi that emerge in dark times no longer operate as an institution. They operate as individuals guided only by the Force. And that shift becomes the spiritual foundation for Luke's era. At the beginning of this video, we asked whether Obi-Wan's message was merely a warning or something more. Now we can clearly say it was a farewell to the old Jedi, a survival guide for the few who remained, and a hopeful whisper aimed at the future. It's a message shaped by loss, but defined by fate. And in that sense, it perfectly captures the moment the galaxy shifted from tragedy to the hope that would eventually save it. If you are enjoying these videos, consider becoming a channel member, and let's uncover the galaxy's greatest secrets together. Thanks for watching.